So in this episode, we'll be making a singularity in JavaScript. If you don't know what a singularity is basically taking the human consciousness and just jamming it into a computer. We'll also be tackling other simple problems that we'll need to tackle in order to make that happen, like computer randomness and cloning the human soul. So stick around for that. Well, what do I mean whenever I say computer randomness? Let's start with that. That's simple, right? The only thing that consistently works on my truck is the check engine light. Everything else is pretty random. And I go and I play a video game, and then they're all beating me all the time because they're so random with all their great ideas and smart things that they think. Well, not really. So actually the way that the original computer randomness worked was it would take epoch time, which is January 1st, 1970, midnight. It would count the number of milliseconds between then and whatever time you decided to roll the dice, for instance. I'm going to roll the dice, random thing's going to happen. Pseudo-random, sure, it's counting the number of milliseconds since epoch time to now, and then it's converting that into whatever number is on the die. So what does that have to do with what we're doing? Well, actually, there is no computer randomness, like I just said. Actually, what they do now is not that. They don't typically calculate off of epoch time. What they're doing now is just an algorithm that's basically so complicated that no rational result consistently happens. It's like, I want to make this mathy thing so hard that something weird's going to happen every time I do it. And that's basically the way it works, but they're still using epoch time based pseudo randomness for salting hashes, which sounds delicious, but it's not. That's basically taking a timestamp and then jamming it into one of those algorithms that I was talking about. None of that matters. What does matter is, let's say you were trying to create a singularity. You have two basic problems that you have to solve. You don't need to jam your dad bod into that. No, it's not about your physical body, it's about your consciousness. So that means that you need to put your memories into the machine. I'll be addressing that in part 2. That's the simple part. But then you also need to put your randomness into the machine. And I'm sure there's some people out there who think that they make logical decisions all the time, and those people are idiots, because that's not true. You know how many times that you've gone to McDonald's and you've been like, ugh, guess I'll get the entire dollar menu and don't look at me, no eye contact when I go through, and you know you're going to feel like crap, you know you're going to look like crap, and you know you're going to regret that decision, but you did it anyways. You got all those memories telling you not to do it, but you did it anyways. Why? Randomness. So let's say I'm over here and I go, okay, fine, randomness exists. In humans, it's a real thing. I'm random, I'm not like a computer. I make bad McDonald's decisions. That's why I'm not a computer, right? I don't use epoch time or algorithms. Well, maybe, or maybe you do. So here's my speculation. Let's say you had your own epoch time. From the time maybe that, say you were a zygote and your brainstem started to form. Maybe at that point in time, that was your internal epoch time that started 0, and every random decision that you make that's not based on your memories but based on randomness instead is based on how many milliseconds occurred between that event and now. Maybe, or maybe not, but if it is true, we're going to build an algorithm today that essentially clones your soul, rams it into a computer to create a singularity out of JavaScript. Where do you start with that? Well, let's just start with epoch time. Are we going to do that? Maybe we won't. I've already programmed this over here, so I'm just going to reference that real quick, display it on the screen, and we'll just go through it line by line. So, if you choose to use DroidScript, you would be putting this in your function on start. If you choose to use it in HTML, so that you can do it on Apple devices or Windows or whatever, you can also do that. Just build it from scratch. Pretty simple. Put it all in a text file, end that file extension with .html, and make sure that all the code that I'm about to share with you goes inside of a script tag. Or just type the script into this JavaScript, what do you call that? Basically a tester that I'll have the link in the description. But anyways, once you've gotten all of that up and running, let's start with this. First, where do we start with this problem? We need basically from the outset, we know that we need to know what your soul is, your time of birth in this context, so, or whatever other date we want to go with. And then we also need to know the date now. And we need to know both of these things in milliseconds. So let's address the first thing. The first thing is going to be the date that you were born, but expressed in milliseconds. So first we need a variable to hold that. We'll call it me_day equals new date. I'm not going to get into JavaScript classes, functions, or objects, but basically what you're doing here is date knows that it's expecting a date. And when you say new, what you're saying is I'm going to give you information, a date that you're expecting to get, and then what I want to get back is the modified information. Okay, so you're passing that in, the date, so we'll just go with 1993, 5/11, 5 being the month and 11 being the day, and then we're going to call this method on it, or whatever it is, whatever it's called, the dot get time. Basically what this is saying is I need to know that information, but I want to know it in the millisecond time. And that the get time in the little parentheses indicates that it's a function, and then the little dot thing indicates that this is a thing that you can do from this, which I think is typically called a method. Anyways, so now we've passed that into a variable that's now called me_day, and now you can call me_day and it has that information in it, which I think we're going to do at some later point in time to sort of do like a little alert to show you what that information is, which you can do right now if you want. Just end the thing, push pause on the video, just go in there and just say alert, parentheses, say me_day, parentheses, thing, and then just see what information comes back if you want. Moving on, the next thing that we'll need to know is, well, what about now? After all, I need to know the difference between then and now. What's now? Okay, so the way that you get that is you could like hard code this exact time in and do the exact thing that you just did, which would be stupid. Don't do that. But instead, there's already a built-in function to do that. So you could just say, we'll just say nowza is the variable that we'll be holding it in. Nowza equals date.now function. All right. So what this is saying is, I want to know what the time is now at this exact millisecond, and I want to know it in seconds or milliseconds. Right? Okay. So now you have those two pieces of information. What are you going to do with them? Well, just subtract them. Right? Just take the now and then subtract the before from it. So that's what the next line of code does, is it basically just says I need a new variable that is indicating, or that is representing, what the thing minus the thing is, the before time and the now time, right? So we'll call that soul. So anyways, equals nowza.me or dash me_day. So that's just subtraction. You're just saying take that number and subtract it from the other number, like normal subtraction. Then that passes that into that variable. Now the next thing that you're going to do, alright, got a new variable. We're doing something weird here called modulus arithmetic or modulo arithmetic. I always forget which is the operand and which is the operation. Doesn't matter grammatically. The point is that it's taking a remainder of a division and then it's applying it in the function. That sounds so complicated. So for right now, that line of code doesn't matter. Just think about this. I'm going to give you the simple concept, but think about this. What I could have done instead of that is done some sort of loop to basically take every number of that integer and add them to each other and then make a new number. And that's the basic idea behind this, because let's say you don't input the exact millisecond that you were born because you don't know the exact millisecond that you were born. Well, the end of that is always going to be a constant, so there's less variation in there. Well, it's going to be constant either way, but at the end of that's always going to be zeros is the point. So you can't just scrape the last digit off, because that's always going to be the last digit of the other. Mathematically, just understand that The basic idea is here you're going to have variations at the beginning of that integer, middle, or end, depending on how you do this. So the best thing to do is just add the whole integer up to each of its individual parts so that you get a unique number every single time. And that's essentially what this operation is doing, is it's doing a little bit different way of doing that, but the basic idea is you're going to get a single digit that represents all of the digits. And the way it's doing it is it's taking the variable, it's subtracting 1, then it's taking the remainder of the division, and then it's like adding it to 1 or something like that to basically get that number. Okay, so that's what that next line does, and there is other ways to do it inside of that part of it, but for now that's just the one-liner way of doing it, so we'll do it that way. The next part is you could alert at that point in time to make sure that that's working. I think that's the way I have it in part of this. But then the next operational part of it is going to be an if statement. So this is where your probability comes in. This is where you're flipping the coin and you're saying, I need to define what's heads and what's tails, and how many heads or tails there are on the coin. So that's what this if statement is doing, is you're just saying, alright, so I'm going to get a unique number every single time. That's going to be between 1 and 9. So if I'm getting this number between 1 and 9, if it's less than 4.5, we'll call it yes, if it's, or heads. If it's higher than 4.5, we'll call it tails, right? So this is where there's some fluctuation in the program. If you'd like to basically ask it whatever question that you want, you could do heads, you could do tails, you could do, and this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my friend's birth date in there, and then I'm going to ask him, since I jammed his soul up into the computer, whether or not he liked being in the computer. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say if offset is greater than or equal to 4.5, then alert. Made a mistake there. The 4.5 is irrelevant because it's never going to be a it's always going to be a whole number, but it doesn't matter. You could say 4, 5, whatever. More probability specifics will be posted in hateful comments on my YouTube video thing below, I'm sure. But anyways, just for now, just say 4 or 5 or 4.5. Alert, I love it in here. Okay, so there's your first if. If it's this thing, if the number is this thing, then I love it in here. And if it's not, then there's where your else statement comes in. So then the else is going to be alert, get me out of here, or whatever. Okay, and you end that statement block, and then you can either put that variable, which is offset, I think. You can put that variable either in the document.write if you're using the JavaScript tester, or inside of Droid script you can just say app.show popup and put it inside of there, or you can also do a regular old JavaScript alert. So within Droid script you can just say alert and then the thing over there. So it depends on how you want to do it, but let's see what happens. He loves it in here. So basically he ate the steak, said, I don't care that all of this is fake. I just make me rich, make me famous, make me enjoy my life, even though it's a fake life. That's good enough for me. And then Morpheus got on his little bicycle and bicycled back to Zion, and then the movie ended and it was super boring.